The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Buckingham Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened the delicate sapphire earrings that had once belonged to Princess Diana. Today was unlike any other day in her royal journey. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon her shoulders, knowing that she and William would be stepping into roles that traditionally belonged to the king himself. Just 3 hours earlier, Catherine had received the phone call that would change everything. King Charles, who had been eagerly preparing to welcome the German royal family for their historic state visit, had been rushed to hospital with complications from his ongoing treatment. The doctors were optimistic, but he would need complete rest for at least a week. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps, as fate would have it, more perfect for testing the next generation of royals. "Are you ready for this, my love?" William's voice broke through her thoughts as he entered their private chambers, already dressed in his ceremonial uniform. His face showed a mixture of determination and concern, the same expression she had seen during their most challenging moments together. They both understood that this wasn't just about fulfilling royal duties, it was about proving themselves worthy of the crown they would one day inherit. Catherine turned to face her husband, seeing in his eyes the same nervous energy that coursed through her own veins. "I keep thinking about your grandmother," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How she would handle a moment like this. The grace, the composure, the way she made everyone feel welcome no matter what was happening behind the scenes." Queen Elizabeth's legacy loomed large over every royal engagement, but today it felt particularly present, as if her spirit was guiding them through this unprecedented situation. The German delegation was not just any visiting party. King Friedrich Wilhelm and Queen Elena represented one of Europe's oldest monarchies, and their visit was meant to strengthen diplomatic ties that had been carefully cultivated over decades. The guest list included prominent business leaders, cultural ambassadors, and political figures who would be watching every gesture, every word, every moment of protocol. Any misstep could have international implications. As Catherine applied her lipstick with practiced precision, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a middle-class girl from Berkshire to potentially representing the British crown on the world stage, the transformation seemed almost surreal. She remembered her first royal engagement, how her hands had shaken so badly she could barely hold her bouquet of flowers. Now, years later, she was being entrusted with one of the most significant diplomatic events of the year. William adjusted his medals, each one telling a story of service and dedication. "Father always said that the monarchy isn't about us," he murmured, more to himself than to Catherine. "It's about serving something greater than ourselves. Today, we prove that we understand that lesson." His words carried the weight of generations of royal responsibility, the understanding that personal feelings must always come second to duty. The palace staff had been working around the clock to ensure every detail was perfect. Catherine had personally reviewed the menu, the floral arrangements, and the entertainment program. She had studied German customs and basic phrases in German to make their guests feel truly welcomed. These small touches, she knew, could make the difference between a successful visit and a memorable one. Outside their window, they could see the final preparations taking place in the courtyard. The red carpet was being unfurled, the honor guard was taking their positions, and photographers were setting up their equipment. Soon, the world would be watching as Catherine and William stepped into roles that no one had expected them to fill so soon. "Do you remember our wedding day?" Catherine asked suddenly, taking William's hand in hers. "I was so nervous I thought I might faint during the vows. But then, I looked at you, and everything else just faded away. I felt like we could face anything together." William squeezed her hand gently, understanding exactly what she meant. Their love had been tested by the pressures of royal life countless times, but it had only grown stronger. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that this moment of professional triumph was also deeply personal. They had spent years being scrutinized, criticized, and judged by the media and public. Every outfit Catherine wore was analyzed, every gesture William made was interpreted. Today, they would finally have the chance to show the world what they were truly capable of when given the opportunity to lead. As they made their way down the grand staircase, Catherine caught a glimpse of herself in one of the ornate mirrors that lined the hallway. She saw not just the girl who had once been dismissed as Wady Katy by the tabloids, but a woman who had grown into her role with dignity and purpose. The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every challenging moment. The palace corridors buzzed with activity as staff members made final checks on everything from security arrangements to the placement of ceremonial swords. Catherine and William moved through it all with practiced ease, stopping to speak with key personnel and ensuring everyone understood their roles for the day. Their calm demeanor helped settle the nervous energy that always accompanied such high-stakes events. In the blue drawing room, Catherine paused to admire the portrait of Queen Victoria that hung prominently on the wall. Victoria had also been thrust into leadership at a young age, forced to navigate the complexities of monarchy while still learning the rules herself. The parallels weren't lost on Catherine, and she drew strength from the knowledge that strong women had faced similar challenges before her. William reviewed his notes one final time, going over the protocol for receiving foreign dignitaries. Every handshake had meaning, every bow had significance, and every word would be reported and analyzed by diplomatic experts around the world. The pressure was immense, but he had been preparing for moments like this his entire life. The sound of approaching helicopters signaled that the German delegation was nearly at the palace. Catherine and William exchanged a final look of encouragement before taking their positions in the grand entrance hall. Around them, the palace staff stood at attention, ready to execute the carefully choreographed welcome that had been planned for months. As the massive doors opened and the first members of the German party stepped inside, Catherine felt a surge of confidence wash over her. This was their moment to prove that the future of the monarchy was in capable hands. The young woman who had once felt intimidated by royal protocol now stood ready to represent her country with all the grace and dignity the moment demanded. The weight of history pressed down on them both, but rather than feeling crushed by it, they felt lifted up. They were part of something greater than themselves, connected to centuries of tradition while also writing a new chapter in the story of the British royal family. Today would be remembered as the day Catherine and William truly came into their own as future leaders of the realm. The German delegation entered Buckingham Palace with an air of understated elegance that spoke to centuries of royal tradition. King Friedrich Wilhelm, a tall man in his early 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, carried himself with the bearing of someone born to leadership. Beside him, Queen Elena moved with graceful confidence, her emerald green ensemble perfectly complementing the formal atmosphere of the occasion. Their entourage included cultural ministers, business leaders, and members of their extended royal household, all keenly aware that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Catherine felt her heart racing as she and William stepped forward to greet their distinguished guests. The absence of King Charles created an unusual dynamic, one that everyone present could feel but no one would openly acknowledge. Instead of the traditional father and son receiving line, it was now the future king and Queen who would carry the full weight of this diplomatic moment. The significance wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "Your Majesties, welcome to Buckingham Palace," William said in fluent German, his voice carrying across the ornate entrance hall with natural authority. The effort to speak in their guests' native language was immediately appreciated, evident from the warm smiles that crossed the faces of the German delegation. Catherine had practiced the same greeting countless times that morning, but when the moment came, she delivered her words with such genuine warmth that any nervousness was completely hidden. King Friedrich Wilhelm's response was gracious and diplomatic, but Catherine noticed something deeper in his expression. There was respect there, perhaps even admiration, for the young couple who had stepped up to handle such an important occasion. "Prince William, Princess Catherine, we are deeply honored by your welcome. The bonds between our nations have never been stronger, and we look forward to deepening those connections during our visit." As they moved through the palace corridors toward the formal reception rooms, Catherine found herself walking alongside Queen Elena. The German queen was known for her intelligence and her dedication to environmental causes, topics that Catherine had prepared to discuss extensively. What she hadn't prepared for was the immediate personal connection she felt with the other woman, a shared understanding of what it meant to marry into royalty and find your own path within ancient traditions. "I hope His Majesty King Charles is feeling better soon," Queen Elena said quietly, her concern genuine rather than merely diplomatic. "But, I must say, it's refreshing to see the younger generation taking such a prominent role. In Germany, we've found that bringing fresh perspectives to old traditions often strengthens rather than weakens them." The comment struck Catherine deeply, not just because of its kindness, but because it reflected something she and William had been trying to achieve throughout their royal careers. They respected the traditions and protocols that had sustained the monarchy for centuries, but they also understood that those traditions needed to evolve to remain relevant in a modern world. Today was providing them with an unexpected opportunity to demonstrate that balance. The formal luncheon had been planned down to the smallest detail, with each course representing a fusion of British and German culinary traditions. Catherine had worked closely with the palace chefs to ensure the menu honored their guests while showcasing the best of British hospitality. As they took their seats in the state dining room, surrounded by priceless artwork and centuries of history, she felt a profound sense of responsibility to make this meal memorable for all the right reasons. William's speech during the luncheon was a masterpiece of diplomacy and personal warmth. He spoke about the shared values between Britain and Germany, the importance of international cooperation in addressing global challenges, and the personal friendship that had developed between the royal families over many years. But what made the speech truly special was the way he wove in personal anecdotes and genuine emotion, making formal diplomacy feel human and accessible. "My wife and I consider ourselves fortunate to be welcoming friends, not just fellow royals," William said, his eyes meeting those of their guests around the table. "The challenges facing our world today require not just diplomatic cooperation, but genuine friendship and understanding between peoples. That understanding begins with moments like this, where we can share not just formal protocols, but real conversation and authentic connection." Catherine watched as the German delegation responded to William's words with obvious appreciation. She realized that her husband had found the perfect balance between honoring the gravity of the occasion and creating an atmosphere where genuine relationships could develop. It was a skill that couldn't be taught in any protocol manual, it came from years of learning to be authentically human while fulfilling extraordinary public roles. During the meal, Catherine found herself in deep conversation with several members of the German business delegation. They were interested in her work with early childhood development, her environmental initiatives, and her efforts to raise awareness about mental health issues. What could have been polite small talk instead became engaging discussions about real challenges and potential solutions. She realized that diplomatic events could be powerful platforms for advancing causes that mattered deeply to her. The afternoon cultural program had been designed to showcase both British and German artistic traditions. The palace musicians performed pieces by composers from both countries, creating a musical bridge that transcended language and nationality. Catherine and William had requested that some of the performances include contemporary pieces alongside classical works, reflecting their belief that cultural exchange should embrace both heritage and innovation. As they toured the palace art collection with their guests, Catherine served as an informal guide, sharing stories about particular pieces and their historical significance. Her knowledge impressed the German delegation, but, more importantly, her passion for the arts created opportunities for meaningful dialogue. Queen Elena was particularly interested in the conservation efforts being undertaken to preserve the collection for future generations, a conversation that revealed shared concerns about cultural preservation in an increasingly digital world. The media coverage of the day was overwhelmingly positive, with international news outlets praising Catherine and William for their poise and diplomatic skill. But the real measure of success wasn't found in newspaper headlines, it was visible in the relaxed body language of their guests, the genuine laughter that punctuated conversations, and the sense that real friendships were being formed rather than just diplomatic obligations being fulfilled. Late in the afternoon, as the formal program was winding down, King Friedrich Wilhelm requested a private moment with William and Catherine. In a smaller, more intimate drawing room away from the crowds and cameras, the German king spoke with unusual directness about the challenges of modern monarchy and the importance of adaptation while maintaining core values. "What I've witnessed today gives me great hope for the future of constitutional monarchy," he said, his words carrying the weight of personal experience. "You've shown that it's possible to honor tradition while embracing change, to maintain dignity while remaining accessible. These are not easy balances to achieve, but they're essential for monarchy to remain relevant in the 21st century." Catherine felt tears welling up in her eyes at the unexpected praise. The day had been challenging, certainly, but it had also been deeply rewarding. She and William had proven to themselves and to others that they were ready for greater responsibilities, that the trust being placed in them was well-founded. The personal validation from someone who understood their unique challenges meant more than any positive news coverage could. As the afternoon dissolved into evening, the success of the day became increasingly apparent. What had begun as a crisis management situation had transformed into a diplomatic triumph, but, more importantly, it had revealed the depth of Catherine and William's partnership both as a married couple and as future leaders of the monarchy. The bonds formed during that single day would influence British-German relations for years to come, but they had also marked a turning point in Catherine and William's royal careers. They had stepped into the spotlight not as understudies filling in for the main performer, but as accomplished leaders in their own right, ready to carry the monarchy forward into a new era. As evening approached, the palace transformed into something magical. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished marble floors, while servants moved silently through corridors, making final preparations for the state banquet that would serve as the culmination of the German delegation's visit. Catherine stood in her private dressing room, surrounded by the careful choreography of royal preparation, as her lady-in-waiting helped her into the most formal gown she had ever worn. The dress was a masterpiece of British craftsmanship, created specifically for this occasion by one of London's most celebrated designers. Deep midnight blue silk cascaded in elegant folds to the floor, while intricate beadwork caught and reflected light with every movement. Around her neck, Catherine wore the diamond Riviere necklace, a piece from the royal collection that had adorned queens and princesses for over a century. The weight of the jewels served as a constant reminder of the history she was now part of, the legacy she was helping to continue. "Ma'am, you look absolutely radiant," whispered her dresser, making final adjustments to the gown's train. "His Royal Highness will be so proud." Catherine smiled at the kind words, but her mind was focused on the evening ahead. The state banquet wasn't just a formal dinner, it was a carefully orchestrated diplomatic event where every gesture would be interpreted, every conversation would have significance, and every moment would be preserved in official photographs for posterity. Down the hall, William was experiencing his own pre-banquet ritual. His tailcoat had been perfectly pressed, his medals polished to perfection, and his formal decorations arranged with military precision. As he adjusted his white bow tie in the mirror, he thought about his father, lying in his hospital bed but undoubtedly watching the news coverage of the day's events. This banquet would prove whether he and Catherine could truly step into the most senior royal roles when history demanded it. The guest list for the evening included not just the German delegation, but also prominent British politicians, business leaders, cultural figures, and members of the extended royal family. Each invitation had been carefully considered, each seating arrangement diplomatically calculated. Catherine had spent hours studying the guest list, ensuring she knew something personal about each attendee, understanding that these individual connections could prove as important as any formal speeches. Lady Sarah, William's aunt, arrived early to offer her support and guidance. As one of the most experienced members of the royal family in handling international diplomatic events, her presence provided both practical assistance and emotional reassurance. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you both," she told Catherine as they reviewed the evening's protocol one final time. She always believed that the strength of the monarchy lay not in its traditions, but in its ability to adapt those traditions to serve each generation's needs. The ballroom had been transformed into a vision of diplomatic elegance. Round tables accommodated the international gathering, each place setting featuring the finest royal china, crystal glasses that had hosted countless state occasions, and silverware that gleamed under the soft lighting. Floral arrangements combined British roses with German edelweiss, a subtle but meaningful gesture that hadn't gone unnoticed by the visiting delegation. As guests began to arrive, Catherine and William took their positions to receive each attendee personally. This receiving line represented one of the monarchy's most ancient traditions, but they brought to it a warmth and genuine interest that made each guest feel personally welcomed rather than simply processed through a formal ritual. Catherine's ability to remember personal details about people she had met only briefly months or even years earlier consistently amazed those around her. The German ambassador's wife, Frau Schmidt, approached Catherine with obvious nervousness. She had been worried about protocol, uncertain about the proper way to address the princess and concerned about making cultural mistakes. But Catherine immediately put her at ease, asking about her recent charity work with refugee children and remembering details from a brief conversation they had shared at a previous diplomatic reception. These small moments of personal connection transformed formal obligations into genuine relationships. When the time came for dinner to be served, the procession into the ballroom followed centuries of established protocol. Catherine walked beside Queen Elena, their conversation flowing naturally despite the formal surroundings. They discussed their children, their charitable work, and their shared experiences of adapting to life in the public eye. The genuine friendship that had developed throughout the day was evident to everyone present, creating an atmosphere of warmth that elevated the entire evening. William's speech at the banquet was perhaps the finest of his royal career to that point. He spoke about the shared history between Britain and Germany, acknowledging the difficult periods while celebrating the friendship and cooperation that had emerged from past conflicts. His words were simultaneously deeply personal and broadly diplomatic, reflecting his understanding that successful international relations must be built on both strategic interests and human connections. Tonight, we gather not as representatives of different nations, but as friends who happen to serve different countries, William said, his voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. The challenges facing our world today cannot be solved by any single nation working alone. They require the kind of friendship and mutual respect that we celebrate this evening, the understanding that our shared humanity transcends any political or cultural differences. Catherine watched her husband deliver these words with a mixture of pride and profound love. She had seen him grow from the shy young man she had fallen in love with at university into someone capable of addressing world leaders with confidence and genuine authority. The transformation hadn't always been easy, but moments like this made every challenge worth enduring. The musical entertainment for the evening had been carefully chosen to reflect both British and German cultural traditions. A young British soprano performed lieder by German composers, while a German pianist played pieces by British composers, creating a cultural exchange that delighted the international audience. Catherine and William had specifically requested that the performers be young artists, reflecting their commitment to supporting emerging talent while honoring established traditions. During the dinner courses, Catherine found herself engaged in fascinating conversations with members of the German business community about sustainable development practices, educational innovation, and the role of monarchy in modern democratic societies. These weren't the polite small-talk conversations that sometimes characterized formal diplomatic events, they were substantive discussions about real issues that mattered to both countries. One particularly meaningful moment occurred when a young German diplomat approached Catherine between courses. She had been following Catherine's work on early childhood development and wanted to discuss possibilities for collaboration between British and German researchers. What began as a brief conversation developed into a detailed discussion about policy implications and research methodologies, demonstrating that diplomatic events could serve as platforms for advancing substantive causes. The evening's success wasn't measured only in the smooth execution of protocol or the positive media coverage that would follow. It was visible in the relaxed laughter that filled the ballroom, the animated conversations that continued long after the formal toasts were completed, and the genuine connections that were being forged between people from different backgrounds and cultures. As the banquet drew to a close, King Friedrich Wilhelm made an impromptu toast that caught everyone by surprise. Rising from his seat, he raised his glass and spoke directly to Catherine and William. Today, you have shown us what the future of monarchy can look like when it combines respect for tradition with openness to innovation, when it honors the past while embracing the future. Germany is proud to call Britain a friend, and we are honored to witness this moment in your remarkable journey. The spontaneous applause that followed was genuine and heartfelt, a recognition that something special had occurred. Catherine felt tears of gratitude and accomplishment welling up in her eyes, while William's smile reflected both relief and profound satisfaction. They had not merely fulfilled their royal duties, they had exceeded every expectation and established themselves as truly capable of carrying the monarchy forward into a new era. As guests began to depart, each one stopped to offer personal congratulations to Catherine and William. The formal protocols of the day dissolved into genuine human connections, with hugs replacing handshakes and personal conversations replacing diplomatic pleasantries. The German delegation left with memories that would last a lifetime and friendships that would influence international relations for years to come. The morning after the state banquet dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine and William sat together in their private breakfast room, newspapers spread across the polished oak table. The headlines were even more positive than they had dared to hope. royals rise to the occasion, proclaimed the Times, while international papers praised their diplomatic skill and natural charisma. But, beyond the media coverage, they both knew something fundamental had shifted in their royal journey. Catherine held her morning coffee with both hands, savoring both its warmth and the quiet moment before the day's responsibilities began. "I keep thinking about last night," she said softly, her eyes reflecting on memories that felt almost dreamlike in the morning light. "When King Friedrich Wilhelm made that toast, I felt like we had finally proven ourselves worthy of the trust people place in us." Her voice carried a mixture of relief and profound gratitude, emotions that had been building throughout their years of preparation for moments exactly like this. William reached across the table to take her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had become natural over their years together. "We've always known this day would come eventually," he replied, his voice thoughtful. "But I don't think either of us expected it to happen like this, or to feel so ready for it when it did." The confidence in his voice was new, born from the success of the previous day but rooted in years of careful preparation and growing experience. Their private secretary knocked gently on the door before entering with a stack of correspondence that had already begun arriving from around the world. Messages of congratulations poured in from royal families across Europe, diplomatic missions, cultural organizations, and ordinary citizens who had been moved by what they had witnessed. Each note reinforced the sense that Catherine and William had not just fulfilled their duties, but had genuinely inspired people with their approach to modern monarchy. The German ambassador had sent a particularly touching personal note, describing how the delegation had been impressed not just by the flawless protocol, but by the warmth and authenticity that Catherine and William had brought to every interaction. "Your Royal Highnesses managed to make formal diplomacy feel like a gathering of friends," he had written. "This is a rare gift that will serve you well in the years ahead, and it has strengthened the bonds between our nations immeasurably." Later that morning, they received an unexpected phone call from King Charles, who had been watching news coverage from his hospital bed. His voice was weak but filled with unmistakable pride as he congratulated them on their handling of the situation. "I couldn't have done better myself," he told them, words that meant more than any newspaper headline. "You've shown the world that the monarchy is in capable hands for generations to come." The conversation with his father affected William deeply, bringing tears to his eyes as he realized how much this approval meant to him. He had spent his entire life preparing to one day inherit the throne, but moments like this made the abstract concept of kingship feel tangible and real. Catherine watched her husband during this call, seeing in his face the boy who had lost his mother too young, the young man who had struggled with the weight of his destiny, and the confident leader he had now become. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, had spent the previous day with their nannies, understanding that their parents had important work to do. But now, in the quiet of their private family time, Catherine and William shared stories about the banquet, describing the beautiful dresses, the magnificent food, and the interesting people they had met. The children listened with wide eyes, beginning to understand that their parents' work was not just a job, but a calling that served something greater than their family alone. Princess Charlotte, with her characteristic direct manner, asked her mother, "Will I have to do things like that when I grow up?" Catherine knelt down to her daughter's level, smoothing her hair gently. "Only if you choose to," she replied thoughtfully. "But, if you do choose this path, I hope yesterday showed you that serving others can be one of life's greatest privileges, even when it's challenging." The afternoon brought a private debriefing session with senior palace staff, reviewing every aspect of the previous day's events to identify lessons learned and areas for improvement. Catherine and William approached this analysis with characteristic thoroughness, understanding that continuous improvement was essential for maintaining the monarchy's relevance and effectiveness. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but they took detailed notes on small details that could be enhanced for future occasions. What emerged from these discussions was a recognition that Catherine and William had brought something new to royal protocol without abandoning its essential elements. Their ability to maintain dignity while remaining accessible, to honor tradition while embracing innovation, had created a template for how modern monarchy could function in an increasingly connected and democratic world. The palace staff, many of whom had served the royal family for decades, expressed their own amazement at how naturally Catherine and William had stepped into their enhanced roles. "It felt like watching the future of the monarchy unfold before our eyes," commented the private secretary, whose experience spanned multiple generations of royals.
They didn't just fill in for His Majesty, they established themselves as leaders in their own right.
That evening, Catherine and William attended a private dinner with close friends who had nothing to do with royal life or diplomatic protocol. In this relaxed setting, surrounded by people who had known them long before their wedding made headlines around the world, they could process the previous day's experiences without the weight of public scrutiny. Their friends marveled at how they had handled the pressure, but, more importantly, they celebrated the personal growth that had made such public success possible. One of their closest friends, who had known them since their university days, observed how much they had both changed over the years. "You've somehow managed to become exactly who you were meant to be," she told Catherine over dessert. "All those years of criticism and pressure could have broken you, but instead they shaped you into someone who can handle anything with grace and authenticity." The comment resonated deeply with Catherine, who reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the shy young woman who had once felt overwhelmed by media attention to someone who could confidently host world leaders and represent her country on the international stage, the transformation had been gradual but profound. Each challenging experience had built resilience, each success had increased confidence, each failure had taught valuable lessons. As they prepared for bed that night, Catherine and William stood together on the balcony of their bedroom, looking out over London's twinkling lights. The city sprawled before them, home to millions of people who looked to the royal family for continuity, stability, and inspiration. The responsibility felt enormous, but, for the first time, it also felt completely manageable. "We did it," William said quietly, his arm around Catherine's shoulders. "We really did it." His voice carried wonder and satisfaction in equal measure. Catherine leaned into his embrace, feeling the truth of his words settle into her heart. They had not just survived their first major test as senior royals, they had thrived, establishing themselves as worthy successors to the generations of monarchs who had come before them. The success of the German state visit would be remembered as a turning point, the moment when Catherine and William truly came into their own as future leaders of the British monarchy. But, for them, privately, it was also a confirmation of the strength of their partnership, their commitment to service, and their readiness to face whatever challenges the future might bring. In the quiet of that evening, surrounded by the weight of history and the promise of the future, they both understood that their lives had fundamentally changed. They were no longer just the Prince and Princess of Wales, they were proven leaders, ready to guide the monarchy through whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead in an uncertain but hopeful future. 3 weeks had passed since the historic state visit, and the ripple effects of that remarkable day continued to resonate throughout the royal household and beyond. Catherine stood in her private study at Kensington Palace, reviewing a stack of invitations that had arrived from governments, cultural institutions, and charitable organizations around the world. Each invitation represented an opportunity to build upon the diplomatic success they had achieved, but, more importantly, they demonstrated the global recognition of Catherine and William as leaders capable of representing Britain on the world stage. The king had made a full recovery and returned to his royal duties, but something fundamental had shifted in the dynamics of the royal family. During their first private meeting after his return, King Charles had spoken with unusual directness about the future of the monarchy. "What you accomplished while I was unwell exceeded every expectation," he had told them, his voice filled with paternal pride and professional respect. "You've proven yourselves ready for responsibilities I hadn't planned to share for several more years." This conversation had led to a significant reorganization of royal duties, with Catherine and William taking on expanded roles in international diplomacy and constitutional matters. The change wasn't just symbolic, it represented a genuine transition of power and responsibility that prepared them more directly for their eventual roles as king and queen. The palace staff had begun referring to this as the new phase, understanding that they were witnessing a historic evolution in how the monarchy functioned. Catherine had thrown herself into her new responsibilities with characteristic determination and grace. Her schedule now included regular briefings with Foreign Office officials, consultations with international development experts, and strategic planning sessions about Britain's soft power initiatives around the world. The shy young woman who had once worried about making small talk at charity events now found herself discussing complex geopolitical issues with confidence and insight. One particularly meaningful development had emerged from her conversations with Queen Elena during the German visit. The two women had maintained their correspondence, and their friendship had blossomed into a formal collaboration between British and German initiatives supporting early childhood development. Catherine had traveled to Berlin the previous week for a working visit that combined diplomatic protocol with substantive policy discussions, further cementing her reputation as a serious international figure.
William's transformation had been equally remarkable.
His military background had always given him credibility in security and defense matters, but his handling of the German delegation had established him as a diplomatic leader in his own right. He now regularly participated in strategic discussions about Commonwealth relations, European partnerships, and Britain's role in addressing global challenges from climate change to economic inequality. The success had also strengthened their marriage in unexpected ways. The pressure of representing their country had required them to depend on each other completely, deepening their partnership beyond the personal realm into professional collaboration. They had discovered that their individual strengths complemented each other perfectly in diplomatic settings, creating a dynamic that was more powerful than either could achieve alone. Their children had also adapted to their parents' elevated roles with remarkable resilience. Prince George, now old enough to understand more about his family's responsibilities, had begun showing genuine interest in the countries and cultures his parents worked with. Princess Charlotte had started learning German phrases, inspired by her mother's friendship with Queen Elena. Even young Prince Louis seemed to sense that something important was happening, often asking when the nice people from Germany would visit again. The media coverage had continued to be overwhelmingly positive, but Catherine and William had learned not to be swayed by either praise or criticism.
Their focus remained firmly fixed on the work itself, on building relationships that would serve Britain's interests while advancing causes that mattered to them personally.
This mature approach to public attention reflected their growing confidence and professional sophistication. One evening, as they reviewed their upcoming schedule together in William's study, Catherine reflected on how much their lives had changed since that anxious morning when they first learned they would be hosting the German delegation.
"Do you ever miss the way things used to be?" she asked, looking up from the diplomatic briefing papers scattered across their desk. "When our biggest worry was whether we'd chosen the right outfit for a charity luncheon?" William smiled, understanding exactly what she meant.
"Sometimes," he admitted. "But, then, I think about yesterday's conversation with the ambassador from South Africa, or last week's discussion about renewable energy initiatives, and I realize that we're finally doing the work we were born to do. All those years of preparation were leading to this moment." Their expanded roles had also brought them into closer contact with political leaders, business executives, and cultural figures from around the world. Catherine had discovered a particular talent for connecting with women leaders, understanding intuitively how to balance the formal requirements of diplomatic protocol with the more informal approaches that often led to breakthrough conversations and genuine partnerships. The German delegation had sent a beautiful commemorative book documenting their visit, with photographs and personal notes from each member of their party. Reading through these messages, Catherine and William were struck by how many people mentioned feeling genuinely welcomed rather than simply officially received.
This feedback reinforced their belief that successful diplomacy required authentic human connection alongside political and economic considerations.
King Charles had begun including them in the most sensitive constitutional discussions, recognizing that their enhanced international profile made their insights valuable in ways that went beyond their positions in the line of succession. They were no longer just future monarchs in training, they were active participants in shaping Britain's role in the world during a period of significant global change and uncertainty. The success had also attracted attention from historians and constitutional experts, who recognized that they were witnessing a significant evolution in how the British monarchy functioned. Several academic institutions had requested interviews and participation in research projects examining the changing nature of royal diplomacy in the 21st century. As Catherine prepared for bed that night, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and paused to really look at the woman she had become. The face looking back at her showed the confidence that came from knowing she belonged in the most prestigious settings, the wisdom that came from years of careful observation and learning, and the contentment that came from finding meaningful work that served something greater than personal ambition. In the months that followed, Catherine and William would host several more international delegations, travel on official visits to Commonwealth countries, and represent Britain at global summits addressing everything from environmental protection to educational innovation. Each experience would build upon the foundation established during that remarkable day with the German delegation, confirming that they had indeed found their true calling as modern monarchs. The journey from that nervous morning when they first learned of King Charles's hospitalization to their current status as respected international leaders had been swift but transformative. They had discovered capabilities they hadn't known they possessed, forged relationships that would last for decades, and established themselves as worthy custodians of an ancient institution adapting to modern realities. As William joined her in their bedroom, they both understood that their lives had been permanently changed by the events of those few days. They were no longer waiting for their moment to lead, they were already leading, already making a difference, already proving that the monarchy could remain relevant and valuable in a rapidly changing world. The future stretched before them filled with challenges and opportunities, but they faced it together with confidence, purpose, and the knowledge that they had found their true path in service to their country and the wider world. The historic moment when Catherine and William stepped in for King Charles to welcome Germany's monarchs would be remembered as more than just a successful diplomatic event. It would be seen as the moment when the future King and Queen of England truly came into their own, proving themselves worthy of the crown they would one day wear and the nation they would one day lead.